know what, because I don't want anything to do with another shooting and me in the school.
You scared it might happen again?
Mm-hmm. And I know it might happen again, probably.
I have the fear of guns now, because I'm scared someone might shoot me.
What do you say to these children who say they're afraid somebody is going to shoot them if they go back to school?
Well, I say to the children that we all pray for you and we all want to lift you up in prayer, that we want to have hope that you get through this without the consequences that we see so often in victims of domestic crime. I practiced law for 25 years and I've been a judge in criminal court for over 14 years, and now I'm doing family law. So I do think I understand what's in the best interest of children. I've been doing thousands of cases. I deal with domestic violence every day. And let me say that there are other issues
can people
that we
bring
can
an
make
AR-15 in your
progress
courtroom?
on, and there are things we can.
Can people bring an AR-15 in your courtroom?
We can work together.
Can people bring an AR-15 in your courtroom? Can somebody bring an AR-15 in your courtroom, Judge?
Well, of course not. That's kind of a loaded question.
Why not?
Of course not.
Let me ask you this: NRA supporters keep saying
you know, it's also important to remember that bringing a firearm on a school in Texas is a felony also.
Well, people don't seem to have much trouble if they want to unleash that kind of destruction to do just that. You know, NRA supporters like yourself, they keep saying that the answer to all of this is good guys with guns. The 19 good guys with guns failed in Uvalde. The cops were there in the school. There was a school resource officer who apparently was MIA, and none of that helped.
Well, I think the issue of law enforcement at Uvalde is a separate question from what we're talking about here today. Their performance has left something to be desired. Even the head of the Texas Department of Public Safety gave an enlightening press conference just the other day. I'm sure you're aware of it too.
With these mass shootings, it keeps coming back to the AR-15 and similar models. Why do people need an AR-15 anyway?
You know, it's just a semi-automatic rifle. I mean, you know, if you want to be prejudiced about the way it looks, but I was aware of what happened in the '94 semi-automatic firearms ban, and there were rifles of similar function that just didn't look as ugly. They weren't black guns like a Mini 14, Ruger Mini 14. And of course, the Ruger Mini 14 was appropriate and the AR-15 was not if it had a bayonet lug or a vertical rear grip. So they designed around
I do want to ask you about the assault weapons ban, but you know, on the AR-15, how is it that an 18-year-old can buy an AR-15 style rifle and have 1,600 rounds of ammo with them like we saw in Uvalde?
Well, he did not have any prior convictions. He didn't have any prior issues that would have kept him from purchasing one. It's my understanding from the news that he purchased it through a firearms dealer. He passed the background check because he didn't have any prior convictions.
Right, but should an 18-year-old have an AR-15?
That's how he bought it.
Should an 18-year-old have an AR-15? What's he going to do with it?
I don't know. Should an 18-year-old have one in the Army?
Well, they have military training in the Army. This 18-year-old in Uvalde did not have military training. He turned 18 and he went out and bought an AR-15.
And the fact is that these kinds of issues are far more complicated than whether we remove something from the public. These issues in criminogenics,
you can't buy a beer if you're 18. You can't buy a pack of cigarettes.
Violent crime are more complicated than the easy answer. Do you want to know why politicians seem to go to gun control? Because it doesn't cost them any money. Fixing the mental health system in this country costs money. I mean, I was around in the Senate, and before I lived in Topeka, when I watched them shut down the state mental hospitals and turn everyone out into the streets, hoping that the community-based mental health would work. And then they wonder why they don't show up every day to take their meds.
Judge, let me ask you this.
This kid was troubled.
Well, we have troubled people all over the world. There's mental illness all over the world. We're the only country that has these mass shootings over and over again. Let me ask you this. You take issue with Wayne LaPierre. You've been trying to have
There
him
have been several other
removed
mass
from
shootings all over the world.
from the leadership, not to the level that we have in the United States. Come on. You take issue with how Wayne LaPierre has run the NRA. I know you want him removed from the organization. This may surprise people, but back in 1999, he testified that he was in favor of background checks to include gun shows. Let's watch.
We think it's reasonable to provide mandatory instant criminal background checks for every sale at every gun show. No loopholes anywhere for anyone.
He says no loopholes.
I'm aware of that.
He says no loopholes. How do you, why doesn't the NRA have that position now when a overwhelming majority of Americans support universal background checks? Why are you standing in the way of what the overwhelming majority of Americans want?
If you would let me answer. If you would if you would just not put words in my mouth and let me answer the question, that would be appreciated. But the reality is that it's the states that are the soft hole in the background check system. They don't report felony convictions. They don't report commitments, involuntary commitments, when people are found to be a danger to themselves or others. There are states that have millions of convictions sitting in a database because they're waiting on the federal government to pay for their employees to input it into the system. The system is flawed because the state's input is flawed.
Isn't the system flawed because your organization stands in front of just about any reasonable piece of gun control legislation that comes through the Congress? Don't you feel any responsibility in all of this?
If I could explain, the reality is that we've worked in Congress to have these systems in the individual states improved. We've urged the funding with the NICS Fix Act that was passed during the Trump administration to try to get the states to get their records up to snuff. And the reality is that they're
not.
But
we're still having mass shootings.
If they don't put the felony conviction,
Judge,
if they don't put the felony conviction in the system, they pass the background check.
Judge, over and over and over.
Where shooters.
Over and over and over, Judge.
Over and over.
We have these mass shootings. Isn't it finally time to say that your way doesn't work? It just doesn't work.
The way we're doing it doesn't work, but the way that we're not making it work is making the background system work effectively, because the states will not do their share of the job. The federal government and NCIC over in West Virginia do a great job compiling the records, doing the background checks, and making sure that individuals are barred from purchasing firearms. But then, of course, they're not prosecuted for their attempt. Now, maybe we should start prosecuting convicted felons who are trying to buy guns, because we get thousands of them.
I know, but Judge, we hear that all the time.
Denied.
And you have these 18-year-old kids shooting up shopping centers and schools and everything. They're not felons. They're just kids, and they have access to an ocean of guns in this country. It's an ocean. We're swimming in guns.
Well, we do have per capita a high number of firearms in this country.
Yeah.
But, the vast majority of them are not AR-15s that you're complaining about. There's very little difference functionally between that and any other semi-automatic firearm that's been around for over 100 years.
If there's nothing different, why do they use them to shoot up shopping malls and supermarkets and schools? The AR-15 is the weapon of choice. They're used to hunt people.
I can't read their minds. I guess you'll just have to ask them. I don't know why. I think people buy things for lots of different reasons. Why don't you commit
right here, sir, that you will help get some semblance of gun safety sanity here in Washington? Could you make that commitment right now to do everything that you can?
I would be happy to sit down and talk with just about anybody that won't insult me. The reality is that there are talks going on right now in Washington, as I understand it, in the Senate. And we'll see what they come up with.
We need action because our children are dying, sir. Our children are dying, Judge. I'm sorry. That's all the time we had. But I just have to say, I think that you and your organization, honestly, I'm 51 years old. This has been going on for decades. And it just seems to me that the NRA just has to look into its soul. And I'm sorry to say it that way, sir, but you and your other board members need to look into your souls and see what can be done for these kids who keep dying over and over again, I'm sorry, that's all the time we have. Judge, thank you very much for your time. Thank you, sir.
Yeah,
thank you.
You bet.
Coming up.